What is up, YouTube? It is Doc here, Docky Style Gaming, and I am back at it again with another GodFall video for you all today. And in this one, we are going to be taking a look at my personal build for Hinterclaw. And if you saw my stream last night, you know how powerful this build is. And with some of the new items I got last night as well, yeah, we are going to be looking at one of the most godly, scratch that, we're not even a god anymore. We have ascended godhood with this build. We are Macros himself. This is our Macros build for Hinterclaw. This is ridiculous. The amount of crit damage, the explosive power, everything that this build has is insane. And I kind of don't want to put it out because I feel like it's going to get nerfed. But let's go over this build in its entirety. So without wasting any more of y'all's time, let's hop straight into this video and straight into this build. So if you've been watching my channel from the start, before the game even came out, you know Hinterclaw was my main from day one, even before it launched. And everything I do when it comes to Hinterclaw is trying to optimize and maximize its damage potential and survivability. And this build has everything. It has the damage, it has the survivability, it even has extra perks to weaken enemies as well. And now paired with the new shard system that was implemented in the game, Hinterclaw is beyond godly. I knew he would be when I was going through the breakdown for his shards, but I didn't understand how powerful this man would be. And yeah, we have some numbers to get into when it comes to this build. So let's just get right into this. Let's take a look at his stats. Right now we are sitting at over 3100 might, over 2100 spirit, and 2200 vitality. Our DPS primary is 3500, our secondary DPS is 2200 over, and then our crit chance is sitting at 63.8, which honestly anything over 60 you are good, especially with Hinterclaw. And then our crit damage is at 350. Now having high crit damage is essential for this build in dealing the maximum amount of damage. But let's keep that 350 number in the back of our mind because that damage number is just going to keep going up. So let's take a quick look at the detail stats if you want to check out all of them right here. Now, like I always say, most of these stats are kind of irrelevant because there are so many other factors that can feed into this that deal even more damage. And like my video says, we'll be hitting well over that 350% crit hit damage. But we'll get into that in a bit. But first, let's start with the weapons we're rocking, and don't worry, I'll show you some substitutes you can use in its place. So right now, I am rocking one of the triple primaries from the Exalted Towers of Trials. We have physical damage, it has marker fragility whenever you hit an enemy with a southern technique. Whenever you inflict a bleed, you shoot up to 2 projectiles that deal physical damage to enemies, and then you have gain blessing of luck whenever you hit an enemy with your northern tech, and gain blessing of infusion whenever you hit an enemy with your southern tech. And then our secondaries are crit chance, and of course, crit chance. So this sword, in my opinion, is very god roll, especially for Exalted Towers of Trials. This weapon allows you to imply 2 different blessings and a mark, and all of these are extremely useful ones to be rocking for Exalted Towers of Trials. We have Blessing of Luck that increases our crit chance, which again is already very good to have on Hinterclaw. Then we have Blessing of Infusion, which increases our chance to inflict ailments with any attack. And then Marker Fragility, whenever you use your northern technique, lets you increase the damage that you are dealing to enemies. So not only are we doing a crazy amount of damage, we're also dealing increased damage on top of that with this sword alone. And that's primarily why I love my second weapon we're about to take a look at, another triple primary stat weapon from the Exalted Towers of Trials. The Spear of Fate with fire DPS, and Bleed and Fire, you might as well rock those on Hinterclaw if I'm being honest. Void's another really good one to use, but honestly, if you're just trying to get as much damage as you can, Bleed procs and Ignite procs are the way to go. But the stats that I have on this build in particular is expose weak points whenever you inflict an ailment, gain Blessing of Endurance whenever you inflict an ailment, and plus 55% damage when you're at full health. And because this build is also about giving you the max amount of survivability, your health should always be at max or damn near close just so you can get that increased damage bonus. Now, being able to expose weak points is very good for some bonus damage, as well as getting the Blessing of Endurance, meaning that enemies deal less damage to you. And again, for Exalted Towers of Trials, this is very useful. Personally, even though this is in my secondary slot, I typically have this out first, and then I pop my weapon technique twice just so I can expose weak points and get that Blessing of Endurance. Then I swap right back to my sword and deal all that damage with the multiple blessings and the marks procced on the side of my screen. And then of course that Fire and Bleed ailment procs. Now for some of you who might not have Blades of Conquest or Spear of Fate, here are a few alternates that I'd recommend to put in their place. A physical Draskull's Legacy or Fire Draskull's Legacy would be a very good one to get. You don't have to farm this from any specific place. It drops randomly everywhere. So Draskull's Legacy for that increased Blessing of Luck and Blessing of Infusion. And then another substitute is a Sword of Courage because it is a physical DPS weapon that can also shoot out those projectiles that deal physical damage. And then again, if you have a Sword of Dominance, which you can get from Exalted Towers of Trials and Ascended Towers of Trials, if you get one that drops with physical DPS that gives you Blessing of Luck and shoots those bleed procs whenever you inflict bleed, yeah, that's another very good one to use in this place. Now, when it comes to polearms, personally, if I didn't have this triple primary, I'd have a Sunflare Destiny, which is a dual primary that comes from the Ascended or Exalted Towers of Trials that could come with a few very useful primaries. Now, personally, I'd kind of want one that had Void DPS, but then also one that gives you greater Blessing of Endurance, and then one that would potentially allow you to summon a Void Sentinel whenever you use your Northern technique. But if you can't get those exact two stats on one of them, another good one to have, if you at least have one of those, would be the one that gives you a percentage to get a Blessing of Fragility whenever you hit an enemy. Again, Blessing of Fragility means you deal more damage to them. So again, that's always a very good one to have, especially with the Void DPS, because you'll be taking less damage and still dealing more damage. Now, moving on to some of these other pieces of gear, I've kind of rocked these in all of my builds that I've had for months and months on this channel, so I'm not going to get too much into them, but we have Mark of Duelist, which is for some additional health whenever you perform a crit hit. We have Lion Talisman, of course, which whenever you perform a crit hit, you gain weapon tech charge and charge speed. And of course, these are the secondaries you should be going after, as much crit as possible and as much crit as possible. Now, right after for the first ring, we have the Aspen Band, which gives you some increased bleed damage, which is very useful for the primary longsword, since that's going to be your primary DPS anyway. Then the second ring, with no surprise, is Eye of the Dragon for some additional overhealth, because again, this build is all about survivability. So whether it's you gaining health from Mark of the Duelist or some overhealth from Eye of the Dragon, and of course some of the augments that we'll get into, Eye of the Dragon is crucial for this build. Next, we have Mace's Banderol, which is for some additional crit chance and crit damage, of course. And with this banner out, you're going to be getting an additional 56% crit hit damage on top of the secondary traits that give you an additional 50, so making that 100 paired with the 350 that we already have on this build. And if you pop a Archon's Tier, that's an additional 154 crit hit damage, with one of the secondary stats giving you some more crit hit damage. And for those of you who haven't been keeping track right now, we're already sitting at 630 crit hit damage. So now that we got all the gear out of the way, let's hop straight into the augments. Now, Carnage is going to be how most of y'all are going to be getting y'all's crit hit damage, because every augment around it is going to be feeding into it, giving it that additional crit hit damage, because you get +5 crit hit damage for every 20 might on adjacent augment, meaning every augment I have has might on it. So this has might on it, 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 and of course these two are might augments. So taking a look at the first one, we have, of course, Rift for that increased damage for each type of element on enemy, and we're running double element, so this is very nice to have. Next, we have Void Shell, which gives you some increased overhealth for every adjacent might augments. And again, because there's might on this one, might on here, Carnage is might, and Twilight Bloom is might, we are getting 253 overhealth every time we perform a crit hit. And with our build being the way it is, every hit is a crit hit, meaning you are always gaining overhealth. Next, we have Twilight Bloom for some additional weapon tech damage, which is going to come in handy. You should always be using your weapon tech, especially once we get into the shards. Then we have Frostfire, which will give you an additional almost 50% crit hit damage during Rampage. And because entering Rampage with longswords is very easy, you're almost going to always be having that bonus 50% crit hit damage, on top of what we're already sitting at 630% crit hit damage, bringing us now to over 670. Then taking a look at the two spirit augments, we have Primal Energy, which is of course for some more overhealth whenever you use a life stone, and then we have Hypnotize, which gives you some additional health whenever you place a banner. And because the banner gives you so much additional crit chance and crit hit damage, you better be using your banner. This build is all about synergizing everything at once to get the max damage and kill stuff as fast as you possibly can. In the background footage, I'm sure you can see how fast I'm killing Solaris, Lunara, Macros, all these bosses and Exalted Towers of Trials like it's nothing. And it's because I'm synergizing my build and using the right items and weapons at the right time, maximizing my shards and banners to get as much crit chance and crit damage as I possibly can on my build. But speaking of shards, let's hop into those right now to see why we're about to be dealing even more damage. So the shards that I'm running on this build is the Great Hunt technique. When you hit an enemy with a fully charged Thundering Slam, they drop 2 orbs that grant you 270 crit hit damage for 15 seconds. Now, this is insane because this is already a stupid amount of crit hit damage, but the second orb that you don't pick up, a teammate could pick up, giving them some additional 270% crit hit damage. So on top of buffing you, you also have the chance to buff your teammates, giving your whole team some additional damage. But if you're still keeping track of the crit damage, throwing that 270 on top of our current number, we will be over 940 crit hit damage. Now, before I get into the rest of it, there are some other things that we can add to this as well, including our main ability, which our Exalted gives us a bonus 30% crit hit damage during Rampage. And again, with longswords, that's very easy. So adding an additional 30% on top of the number that we're at right now, we are about to hit 980%. And then if we pair the Archon Fury, that can give us an additional 150%. We're sitting at well over 1,100 crit hit damage. Now, that's still not all. So let's go back into the shards and see how we're about to be getting even more damage out of it. So if you're synergizing and proccing everything properly, Way of the Wolf is about to be stupidly strong. The Way of the Wolf shard applies a doom tag for 10 seconds whenever you hit an enemy with a timing attack. The tagged enemy stores 60% of your crit hit damage that you deal to them. Now, before I finish it, again, if we're sitting at over 1,100 right now, that's 60% of that. Meaning that our doom tag alone, with our crit damage that is taking 60% of, will be dealing over 670% crit hit damage per enemy that it hits. Now, what's dope about Way of the Wolf is that whenever you use a timing attack, it procs it on any enemy. So if you're using a regular like Northern Southern technique timing attack, it'll proc the doom tags in a mini AoE. So any enemies near you that get hit with that timing attack will get those little orbs, or crit bombs as I call them, on top of their heads. Now, if you're using a shield attack and doing the arcing throw that spins around every enemy and then do your explosive wave, all of those enemies that shield hits will then get bombs. And once one of them blow up, everybody blows up. And once everybody blows up, all life on the field is done. Like, everything is dead. It is stupid. Again, you can see it in some of my video footage right now, whether I'm killing Macros with it and his life just melts to 0, or Solaris's life going to nothing. Same with Lunara. It is dumb how fast these crit bombs with all that stored crit damage actually deals. I see a lot of people running Display a Power banner, which is a very, 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 very good banner. Like, I love it. It deals a lot of damage and it is super fun. But all of that stored damage that you could be dealing with Way of the Wolf, on top of the additional 270 you get from the Great Hunt technique, is way more powerful in the end. And the best part about Way of the Wolf is there's no cooldown. As long as you're popping timing attacks, you can always proc Way of the Wolf or the Doom tags on any enemy on the field and just keep recasting it on multiple enemies. Now, moving on to the last part of this before we get into the Ascension points, this is the skill grid I am rocking right now. I have my weapon tech and weapon timing at max. Of course, we got our Rampage at max because you want that additional crit hit damage. I put one into Sundering Slam so that you can take advantage of that shard. And then, of course, you're going to want your crit chance, crit hit damage at max. Takedowns I always keep at max because you're going to be using your weapon techniques anyway to do timing attacks, so you might as well get a free takedown with it in the end. Shield throw, you are going to want to make sure it is at least at level 3 so that you can get that explosive wave, because that counts as a timing attack and that will apply way more of those doom tags to enemies. And the more doom tags on enemies, the more explosions you get, the more crit damage that hits, and the faster you can kill bosses, especially bosses surrounded by mobs of enemies, because each one of them will blow up for that amount of crit damage. Now, if you want to mix and match and switch out some of these other points, you can, especially if you want to put them into banners so you can increase the banner charge and overhealth that you gain, but really just the charge speed so you can keep putting it out as fast as you can. because again, that's going to give you a massive boost to your crit hit damage. Now last but not least, let's take a look at the Ascension levels. Now again, like I always say, Ascension levels don't really mean much until you hit 375, because that's when you start getting the big boy stats, but I know people like to look at them. Again, even though it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, you're going to fill all of these up anyway, regardless of what your Ascension powers are going to be, or when you at least max them out. So these aren't too important right now, again, until you hit 375. But speaking of, these are the powers if you want to check them out, and this is what I'm rocking on just about everything. So that is the Macros Hinterclaw build in a nutshell. The only thing that would make this build even better is if they actually gave us the macro skin to put on Hinterclaw, because this is the strongest, godliest, most powerful build I think I have put together for Hinterclaw to date. Now again, yeah, people are going to be like, but what about Consume? Anybody can do Consume. You can put Beetle Talisman, Diamond Charm on everything. You see one Consume build, you've seen them all. It's literally nothing special at this point to make a Consume build. So yeah, you probably could get even more damage out of this build with Consume, but the amount of damage that the bombs do is on par than Consume. Again, you saw how fast some of these enemies' health bars ticked down the second one of the crit bombs on their heads blew up. So the fact that I can still deal that much damage with Hinterclaw without even needing to resort to using a Consume build is what makes this build, in my opinion, just one of the strongest builds for Hinterclaw in the game, if not the strongest. Paired with its killer survivability, with his weapons that give him Mark of Fragility, Blessing of Luck, Blessing of Infusion, and other items that give him the Blessing of Endurance, you can have multiple blessings and marks up, giving you increased damage, reduced damage, dealing more damage to enemies, and max survivability. You just can't go wrong with this build, on top of all of the damage that you're doing. So let me know in the comment section below if you're going to try and attempt this build, if you're going to be making it, and if you have all of these items already and are already testing it out. Let me know how far you've gotten in Exalted Towers of Trials and how powerful this build truly is. And of course, if you've made any adjustments to it, let me know in the comment section below. I might have to retweak it and see how much stronger we can get this build. But with that, thank you all for watching. Like always, I will catch you all in the next one. Be sure to leave a like if you liked the video, and if you didn't, still leave a like, because nobody's going to see that dislike. And if you haven't joined the Discord, a link to that is in the video description. We got guides, builds, LFGs, and so much more for GodFall, games I cover on the channel, and some games I don't, as well as be sure to follow the Twitch. I stream just about every day, if not every day, so if you want to catch some of my builds in progress, like yesterday with my Hinterclaw build, or just other games that I might play, definitely follow me on the Twitch channel. Other than that though, I will catch you all in the next one, guys. Thanks for the love, thanks for the subs, peace.